Greetings. Well, welcome to our conversations with Katrina. I don't actually have a name for them yet. So I don't have a name. So we'll just go with conversations with Katrina for now. I did at one point want to do it alive with Katrina because I've been doing those alive in the woods and discuss what makes you feel alive. And so that might be the future, but that's getting ahead of myself. So today we are going to be discussing the subject of what does empowerment mean to you? So again, these are just conversations. I'm not interviewing anyone. We're having a conversation about the meaning of empowerment for each of us. And first, I should probably introduce myself. I always assume everybody knows me, which is ridiculous because that's obviously not true. But if I am in a camera, it always feels like I'm addressing people that know me already. But in case you don't, my name is Katrina Clay. I first and foremost, as an occupation, published the Healing Springs Journal, which is a New York State's upstate New York wellness publication. And again, that's been since 2002. So we're about to hit 16 years. And it has kind of a holistic orientation to it. And then additionally, I teach workshops that have to do with the modern shamanic practice and bringing that into the modern life and how to merge the two. And so my friend today is Dineen, and please introduce yourself.
Well, my name is Dineen Carta. I am a life coach. I am an energy healer and an author and a poet. And I am currently touring with a show about feminine empowerment that deals with that subject in women's lives. So that tells a little bit about me.
Perfect. And for those of you watching, Dineen and I actually really just met, right? Or did we know each other for a little while virtually and then meet in person just recently?
Yeah, virtually. I really enjoyed your live videos in the woods. Those days that I can't get out into nature, you brought it to me through your live videos, and I just they centered me. So I connected with you there, and then the article that was written on my show through Sarah. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Yes, mm-hmm. Right. And then the Healing Springs Journal, I can't say sponsored because we're all responsible for buying our own lunch, but organized a luncheon for both readers and advertisers, and you came to the first one and the second one, and that was how we met.
Yes. And we had a great conversation when we were sitting there and thought, maybe we should do this. Maybe we should do this live.
That's right. Maybe we should. And so then, so now my dog wants in, so I'm going to go let her in, and I'm going to pause the recording.
Yes, of course.
All right, so we're back. All right, so I'm going to ask you first, Dineen, what does empowerment mean to you?
Yeah, empowerment. Empowerment to me, empowerment means being in your authentic self and being able to express, to me, it means to be able to express that in the, not only within yourself, but in your outside life. So giving a voice to it, giving a reality to it. And I think empowerment is also about showing up with all your colors, not having to censor or filter or be pleasing for others, not to present for others, to be what you think others need you to be, but to be who you truly are inside yourself. That's empowerment to me. Empowerment is about expressing your rights and your value and requiring that you be valued as well. Those are some things that come to mind off the top of my head. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, my thoughts not so much about empowerment yet, but coming up, or what came up while you were discussing was a situation that just came up the other day. I'm part of this Facebook group, and I was on a live call with the whole group, or most of the group, and each person was receiving a card reading. It was just a one card, not a tarot card reading, but just one card, and it was the facilitator's own deck that she created herself. And no filter was the card I got.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting, because for me, I was kind of like, well, I don't feel like I filter very often. But then I started really diving into it, because why would I have received that card without having some need or whatever to overcome that? And I just started thinking about how often our society, we like filters, both filters creating a different look, so like a photo filter,
yes,
and as well, which covers up things that we might not like about the way we look. Then we have the filters of our expression. So as you had said, the no filters comes from empowerment, right? And I started to just review things a little bit more on my own self specifically, and realized that I definitely do have filters. I think we all do, if we're at all human or American. I don't know about other cultures, if it's just an American thing or more so here. And
you know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking almost like, I don't even know if I think filter's necessarily the right word for it. Like, I think it's, I think it's more about being able to express our vulnerability. Maybe filter, it's okay to be conscientious of another's feelings, still express a truth. Like, I think it's okay to be able to express a truth, but still be conscientious about how you say it, and being present with another person's vulnerability when you're speaking a truth, so that someone might call that a filter, but I think that's appropriate. I do. But on the other hand, like, I think part of what it is being allowed to be vulnerable, but being allowed to, like, allowing that, that maybe like scary part of ourselves, that part, that sensitive, maybe insecure part of us to come out when we're relating to someone, because I think that creates empowerment in the way that when you are vulnerable, it invites the other person to be vulnerable too.
Right.
And then you have a more authentic connection. And that creates empowerment, because as you connect authentically, you create power between the two of you, and you create connection so that you both are allowed to be who you truly are. And the more you're your true self, the more empowered you become, and the more you invite more people in your life to connect with you. I mean, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I like that. I can see the connection, or, you know, the difference of what you're referring to now. And you're right, maybe filter isn't the right word. I had just heard it, you know.
Yeah, I used it
Myself,
too.
and I was thinking it. Yeah, I was thinking it already. And I do think that filters, you know, like everything, language is, I have a love-hate relationship with language because, you know, it is so awesome. I have so much conceptual ideas going through my system, and I like being able to express them. And that's what language allows, is one of the ways I do that. And probably the primary way I do that, because of writing and speaking. But what I don't like about it is the fact that one word could have so many meanings. So filter, we started with the filter being that place where it is like a false, filter. And now I can't think of another word, but
I get it. Yeah, totally.
A false application over you. But yet, as you mentioned, the filtering of conscious filtering of what you're saying, so that it is appropriate in a situation. They kind of mean the same thing, but there is
a
nuance, yes. And it's true also about most words, you know. And in our sort of holistic community, or new age-ish community, all words that I'm not particularly fond of anymore, because they started off really pure, perhaps, and except for the new age. I never liked that word, because most of what they were referring to as new age was actually old age, you know, brought forward into the modern world. And but these words get overused, and then they lack the purity that they started with. And filtered, you know, is kind of like one of those, or it could potentially be. But really, maybe it's not so much that maybe it's really just that all words have a dual meaning to them, depending on who's looking at it and the situation you're in.
Right. Yeah. I think you're right. I think there's the filter in the terms that you were using it in terms of like putting some kind of falseness into your communication, or who you know, and into the way you're relating, is something definitely that if we can overcome, we can become more empowered. But conscious, I like how you phrase that, conscious communication, maybe that's a better terminology than filtering your speech. Maybe that's a better appropriate, conscious speaking, conscious relating. And maybe that's a good term also for when you show up vulnerably, or if you show up authentically, you're consciously communicating, you're consciously, I don't know, authenticating. I don't know if that's a right word, but I just made that up.
Well, I like it.
Authenticating, right? I like that. You know, it's kind of like when you're being real, you're authenticating, you know? So I don't know. So I think you're right. I think we could get bogged down in the word, but the reality is, you know, how can we step forward and be true and be real, you know? And I think it requires us facing that part of us that holds back.
Right.
You know, what's blocking us?
Right.
You know, what is that block? You know, to showing up that way.
Right. And I think it sort of boils down to, or starts, maybe not boils down to, but I think it might originate in how well do you even know your inner world?
Yes.
You know, because it's almost impossible to not filter we'll just keep with that term. it's almost impossible not to filter if you don't really know what it is your core, your core inner being. And then when I start really thinking about it, I'm like, well, yeah, but what does that even mean? But there is this feeling, it when you're there, right?
Ah,
I
ah,
feel like I know it when I'm there,
I like that.
and
I like that.
you don't always know it when you're not there, I don't think, because our interpretation uses filters.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I love that. Yeah, I mean, it's we, from the day we're born, we're conditioned, through everything that happens in our lives, our experiences, our authority figures, all we kind of, we morph and adapt and create this identity for ourselves that's manageable and that we feel acceptable being, that's we feel is normal, or, everybody, we're likable, we're okay, but so we can become conditioned to believe that's, who we really are. And so like you said, that deeper essence of ourselves that's underneath all the stuff that we've become so people will be happy with us.
Yeah.
How do we dig that out? I think what you said, a lot of us aren't aware of that inner life, and or when we're coming in and out of that, but I think you're right. I think there's a sweet spot. I think, like what you said, I think there is, I want to hear your answer to this too, but I think there's like a sweetness and maybe a peace, I don't know, for me it's like a mixture of a peace and a joy. That balance between peace and joy, and a sense of being grounded, perhaps being very aware of what's happening around me, not being pulled out of myself. But I don't know, there's only almost a feeling that percolates up when I know I'm being real, like I don't know, it's hard to describe, isn't it?
It is, and yet I know what you're talking about. So
yeah, so maybe that's it. Maybe we do know without being able to describe it.
Right. In the past, one thing that I've just used, or a way that I've described power,
Yeah,
is slightly different than the word empowerment, perhaps, but
yeah,
power to me, okay, so we're each individually given, for lack of a better word, not given, have, and some sense of, well, let's see, you might call it spirit, that thing that animates us, that, like, so it's very similar to the power of a light. So it's plugged in, and you turn it on and the power goes into it. But without having that power, you don't turn it on. Just like if we don't have the power, we're not alive, we're stopped. Yeah. And so we're all given, say, 100 megahertz of power. And if you're spending, say, 20 megahertz of power on pleasing your boss, and meaning that you're spending 20 megahertz of power on behaving in a way your boss expects you to behave, and 20 megahertz on your significant other. Ultimately, coming back to empowerment is pulling all those cords, or power cords, from those other sources, and bringing it into yourself. Yes. And sitting within that. And I think that might be the feeling we're talking about, is when
that is beautiful.
unplugged from all these other places and have them within ourselves, that's that feeling we're feeling. Feeling is one of those words that has so many different meanings. You can say it 3 times in a sentence, and like that feeling of a feeling that we're experiencing and having a hard time expressing, or coming up with words, because it's beyond words, that particular essence of empowerment in my world, in my opinion. So
I just love, oh my God, I just love that analogy. Wow. Wow, that is great. Yeah. I love the idea that you're pulling your source of power away from others.
Yeah.
When, like you said, the plugs were all into these other, so it's your sources of power are not others, and they're not other directed. So they're more internal. They're from you're going within, and you're accessing your own personal, you're kind of cultivating and harvesting your own knowing and truth by silence, perhaps by being with yourself, by listening.
You're right.
I think it's a transition from speaking to hearing. I think
right.
Sitting with your thoughts, sitting with yourself, and actually hearing what's actually percolating up from within you. I think maybe too, what do you think of this? I think it comes from asking yourself questions too. I think it's about sitting in that place, pulling out your power plugs from externally, going within, and then sitting with the questions of your own life. If there's something you're needing to shine light on, asking yourself that question and being open to hearing what exactly that answer is for you, outside of what everyone else might say.
Yeah, right.
And that gives you empowerment in your choices,
right,
in your life, because you're following your own answer to that question, not an answer that you get from outside of yourself, from other people.
Yeah, right.
That's a thought I had when you were talking about that.
Right, which makes sense, because then if you do follow what you believe, typically we're just doing what we believe another their opinion is, but then there we go, plugging in our source, our energy into somebody else's, and losing that. And I think not having all of your power within yourself, and instead plugging it into other people's, I think that's the start of potential illness, because you're not your body, because we literally use our bodies. In your first opening, something you said reminded me about how important our bodies are. We have a tendency to think of them as just vehicles, that carry us around. Those of us in certain circles anyway, like that study and concentrate a little bit more on spirit, then we might forget that our bodies are like so wise.
Yes.
And if we're giving off our power to others, then that body it's not able to function fully.
Yes.
And
that reminds me, I know even in my practice, with life coaching or energy work, or there is we're always in contact with other people. We're always communicating, relating. We could even have energy come to us when we're passing in the street, so to speak, from another person. But I think for me, there's always the need, in order to serve or in order to communicate with others. That's a necessary part of life, and it's an enjoyable part of life. But also, I think what I have to do, and what I also recommend other people do, is come back to, in order to serve and in order to connect, in order to have empowering relationships, I have to come back in and check in with my body, check in, refill up, fill back up by going within, because the body energetically can become sapped. It can become depleted, and our body gives us signals of that, our mind, our emotions, that's what I was thinking of when you were talking about the body and unplugging. And so that happens to me, is that I have to make sure that I balance my time in communication and with others with time to fill the well, so to speak.
Right. Beautiful. And actually, while we're sort of talking about a session with you, I'm curious, how does that work?
A session with me?
Yeah, as a coach, how does that look?
Well, sessions are intuitively driven for me, but I will tell you that there are certain tools that I use. One of the things that that ties into the empowerment piece, a tool that I use, is something that also I bring alive in the show that I'm touring with, is the idea that we have different roles and identities that we play in our lives, and that these roles and identities that we play, we may or may not be aware of, just like we were talking about originally, this conditioning that we created. And what happens is, sometimes a role or an identity it has strengths and it has limitations, whatever these identities that we have. And we may be taking an identity or role and letting it encompass more of our lives than it needs to. I don't know if that makes sense. But what I help people do is identify these different roles they play, and allow them to assess their strengths and limitations, and then be able to come within, like we're talking about, become connected with who they really are, and be able to access whatever role they need when they need it, instead of being too identified with any particular role. Does that make any sense? That's a pretty deep answer. So basically, in coaching, one of the tools I use is helping people identify and who their essential essence of who they are is different from the roles they play, and how to come from a place of empowerment when they're living their lives, to be able to use the roles for their advantage and not for their limitation.
All right.
Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And what it made me think of, in the analogy of plugging in and unplugging, plugging into source, plugging into that which animates us, and unplugging from other people, I was thinking that another way we plug in is not necessarily only to other people, but also to roles. So if we're plugging ourself into a role, thinking that's what's giving us our essence, then that's not coming from a powerful place. Instead, unplugging from the role and still maintaining your role. Does that make sense to you? So it's like you can be in a role, like be the president of your own company,
Mm-hmm.
but without having the presidency of that company being your essence. It's just something on the
Yes.
outside that you do.
Yes. Yes. And not being, yeah, because there's a train of thought that I was following with that I was going to go.
Good, because I kind of
No,
went.
I know we're kind of like grappling a little
Yeah.
right now. Because I struggle to describe it myself. I think when we play a role, when we have a role in our lives, and that can be a very important role, we can become so identified with it that whether we're successful or we fail in that role, we think we can become connected that we are failures, or we are, you know what I'm saying? We can identify completely with the role, and it can affect how we feel about who we are.
Yeah, right.
And so part of the idea is like sometimes is to separate, to have a little bit of detachment from the success or failure of any particular part of our lives, because that does not define us.
Right.
We are defined by our inner being. So that's what I was hearing when you were talking about that. Like, so when I help people in coaching, I help them find their own voice, their own, the reason why they think they're on this planet, outside of all the roles they play. You can take your purpose, your inner reason, your inner meaning, and you can use that to guide all the roles you have. But if you come from the roles first, then you might get lost. But if you come from an inner essence and an inner sense of purpose, and then you apply that to all the roles you have,
yeah, right,
then that imbues them with a consistent theme and a reason for your being, and then your life is more fruitful and powerful, and then you're empowered. Does that make sense?
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Hopefully it makes sense to those
Yeah.
parts.
Yeah.
So that's beautiful. I did have a thought in that sentence, and then it fleeted out as quickly as it came. It went.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate. I thought it was going to really be a good one, but
Yeah. But that, that is, the show that I'm traveling with
yeah.
is about that. It's about, feminine empowerment. It's about helping, exploring the dynamics of women and exploring the dynamics of how can we be empowered? How can we be authentic? How can we express our truth in the world, separate from all the roles and being pleasing and all these other things that women often become identified with.
Something I'd like to point out is how hard it is to recognize you're feeling identified with something.
Oh yeah.
Because you're identified with it, so it feels so real.
Yes. I think one of the indicators a lot of times is discomfort. Sometimes we come to a point where we're struggling in our lives, or we feel like maybe we don't have enough energy for ourselves, or we feel depleted, or we feel, that's normally when someone might come to me in coaching is something's not working.
Right.
So that role or that expansion of that role that's maybe taken over a lot of your life may have worked for a long time. You may have even created that role to overcome something else in your life. You may have created an identity to get over something else.
Right.
And that identity was working great. And maybe it really works great in your job, but then when you come home and you're trying to relate to your partner, it isn't working.
Right.
So someone will come and there's something in their life that's not working. There's angst, or there's pain or there's discomfort or there's illness, like you said. And then they're like, okay, I don't know how to get out of this place. And then that's when we tease out these identifications that they're just realizing through their discomfort that they're having. They're not aware that's what they're having, but that's what I help in coaching, is to help them understand.
Right. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And so my next and probably our last question is about your show.
Yeah.
How does that work? I haven't seen it yet.
Well, it is it's half stage play. I through the story of a character named Sunny, who goes through a lot of life's challenges that women face, and she tells that her story, but the story is also told not only through the protagonist, but also through 3 other characters which represent her inner world.
Oh.
So we get to see, whenever she's facing whatever she's facing, we get to see these different parts of herself deal with the challenge that's in her life, and they're navigating with each other, and they're debating with each other, and which is often the case within ourselves. There's different parts that are not all agreeing as we're trying to attempt to deal with our lives. So we get to see this happen in Sunny. And we get to see how she resolves the conflicts of her life through navigating her inner world. And then the second part of the show is an interactive opportunity for people to work with me, or we will speak about issues and see those things played out on the stage, topics and things people might bring to the forefront. So yeah, it's happening on January 27th. The next show, I'm traveling with it, but the next show is at Spirit Tree Connections in Latham, New York, and it's at 7 p.m. on January 27th.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, it's a Saturday. 2 Saturdays from today.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So
it's going to be exciting.
It is exciting.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. And so how did you start this? How did this come about for you?
You know, it came as a natural flow from my book. I wrote a book of poetry about my journey as a woman, and dealing with a lot of the topics that I deal with in the play, and wanted to take it to the next level because I was invited as a coach to travel and speak. And something about that just wasn't resonating. This is where we talk about going within, because there was something, I was called to be in the role of presenter, of speaker, and something about that wasn't feeling right. And again, to tie it into what we've been talking about, I felt a discomfort about the idea. And so then I went within. I sat with myself, focused on my breath, went within, and it came to me that maybe because my coaching is mind, body, spirit kind of coaching, I thought, well, I want to reach people's mind, body, and spirit when I'm presenting. How can I do that? And I thought, how better to do that than in a performance piece where people are pulled in through their hearts, through their vision, through their thinking, through their mind, through their spirit. Everything is activated when you're watching a performance. So I thought that would be a more rich way to reach people and motivate inspiration. So that's how the show came up, a connection through my book and through how I wanted to connect with others through coaching.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm so thankful that you followed your own inner power.
Thank you, because it's proving to be a beautiful healing experience for me as I do it, and a healing connective experience for the people in the audience. I'm very pleased. And that's the thing, when you follow your inner guidance and you pull out those plugs and you follow, it seems to naturally become something real and true. The universe supports it.
Right.
You know? The universe supports those inner callings that we have.
Right. I like to think of it as the self-organization of life.
Ah,
You know, life, which in our world, our world, meaning actually America, our culture, we have a tendency to forget that there is a self-organization to life. And I think there's kind of a debate on whether the listening to yourself or listening to others allows you to be more in the flow, you know, because it is. But I personally, of course, I personally think you have to listen to yourself and others probably, but I happen to be very individual oriented. And if you look into certain systems, I actually am built and designed that way.
yeah.
But, you know, and others maybe are not so much, but so I'm coming from that place of very individualized expression, but I still believe that your best service to the whole is by knowing yourself individually. You're not, the minute you start thinking about the whole without thinking of yourself, you forget what your contribution is, and the energy of everything just dissipates, you know.
That's really powerful. Yeah.
As opposed to us all bringing into unity our own flow.
I think you're right. I mean, I think when you focus on your own healing, and your own grounding, then it naturally serves the whole.
Right. I agree.
Right? I think that's what I'm hearing you say. And so it can be you could short circuit if you try to serve the whole without also strangely serving your own being.
Right. Yeah.
Sounds strange, but it's true.
I agree. Well, and somehow our culture has gotten so far away from nature and natural ways of being. I think that it sounds odd because it's so in conflict with what we're told. Oh, I remembered that. And then we're almost at an hour, I think. So, but I did remember the thought that I had earlier. And that is the funny thing about being told it was in response to you saying not being over-identified with failing or success.
Yeah.
Because when we're kids, and actually throughout life, but especially when we're kids, our parents and our teachers and whenever you hear something like, well, he called me fat, or, you know, whatever it is, you're told not to pay any attention to them. And, you know, then you succeed and everybody's like, well, you know, wants you to take that on.
Yeah.
You know, like this conflicting information we're given all of our lives. So how can you not do one without the other? You know, so you're taking both. You're either taking all of it in and claiming it as your own, or shutting down and not taking any of it. And there's that, as you said earlier, there's like a sweet spot between that, where you can accept success and failure as whatever it is, you know, and just, you know, not identify with it being you. I'm not a failure. I failed at.
Yeah, there's an analogy that I've heard recently that I think works really well for this. Someone was talking about the ground beneath the ocean, the floor of the ocean.
Right.
And the idea that we are the ground, we are the floor on the bottom of the ocean. And all the waves that happen, that's the success and failure. The disturbances on the water, that's the success and failure. It's just things that happen on the surface of us.
Yeah, right.
But we are the ground. We are the thing that's, that's steady within it. So, if we can have success and failure, but not become tossed about by it.
Yeah, right.
That's an ideal, obviously. I mean, that's an ideal we're talking about. We're obviously talking about an ideal, but but that's the thing to always aim for is to be happy within ourselves, and with all our colors, with our success and our failure, whatever happens in our lives, that it's all part of the the great tapestry of life, that it's all part of all the weaving that allows us to be the rich people that that we are. We wouldn't these experiences are part of us, but they don't define us. It's kind of like you said, another sweet spot. It's another sweet spot.
Right. Well, beautiful. This was really fun.
Yeah, this has been fun, Katrina.
Thank you for coming and conversing with me, and I hope to do it again.
Yeah, I would love to do this again. This has been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's great. Well, thank you, and I'm actually going to just stop recording.
That's great. Okay.
And we can stay on. But enjoy your day, everyone.